Good
I am.
morning, LinkedIn family. It's a welcome Wednesday, and I am very pleased to always have a coffee with Bob with new connections or fairly new connections in the case of Doug Thorpe here. Um, we've been connected for a little bit, but we really haven't had a chance to engage until I invited him to be on Coffee with Bob, which I think is fantastic. Um, Doug is an executive leadership coach. I love executive coaches. I think more people need it and should take advantage of it. If you're not connected, Doug, if you're not following Doug, if you're not engaging with Doug, I highly recommend it because he's got some great content that's out there. Doug, welcome to Coffee with Bob. I'm really glad you were able to join.
Hey, thanks, Bob. Likewise, happy to be here. And as you mentioned, I do executive coaching. I also do some business advisory work.
Oh,
Once upon a time I was a banker, so I've seen a lot of different kinds of business, large and small. And I love just helping folks with their entrepreneurial desires and also executives in larger business settings.
oh, very cool. Tell us a little bit about some of the executives that you work with and some of the different kinds of companies that you've been exposed to, because I always think that's interesting.
I've had the real good fortune, Bob, to work with some amazing executives, and as I like to say, sometimes I enjoy working with people that are already successful. And just to drop a few names corporately, I've coached at ExxonMobil, at UPS, Coca Cola. Regions Bank, Mizuho Bank, and a couple of other publicly traded companies.
Wow, that's amazing. But when I notice your posts, or when we see your posts in the feeds, you're talking a lot about entrepreneurs and focusing on entrepreneurs. How is that shift for you, and what about that attracts you?
It's an interesting thing, and I'll try to keep it simple. You could say I grew up in the corporate world. I was with the Chase banking organization, as I mentioned, as an old banker. But entrepreneurship was in my blood. I grew up the only child of a single mom, and she was an entrepreneur. I watched what she did and was fascinated by it. And after I took an early retirement from banking, I actually was involved in the creation and running and ultimately selling of five different companies. So I've done my own little hand at serial entrepreneurship and love it. It's the heartbeat of America as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, awesome. So, I would imagine that there have been a lot of leadership challenges this past year and a half. During the pandemic, and even now as we're coming out of it, there are even more leadership challenges that are going on.
Right.
What are you finding with your clients?
Uh, That's a great question, and there's no doubt this is a historic. I think you run out of adjectives to describe what we've been through the last 18 months. But I think one of the biggest challenges I get from clients, they talk about resilience. People are tired.
Mm.
um, eh, it seems the whole work at home dynamic has allowed people to lose their boundaries. So while it might be great, you don't have to make the commute into the office. There's this sense of, well, I'll get started early because I have to do something with my kids later, and then I'll come back and do my work, and then you kind of lose track of what
Mm.
should have been your normal work day.
Yeah, yeah. So, and how do you coach leaders to get beyond that? I mean, what is it? What kind of advice do you have to give some of those leaders out there today that are watching this
Yeah.
on helping them navigate through that?
The usual thing we talk about is all about trying to reset some boundaries, get a little more intentional with your calendar, get a little more intentional with your willingness to say no when there is a request. And it may not be a hard no, but just no, not now, and have the real challenge about exact timing and expectations. People have gotten really quick about just saying yes and piling it on, and I think that's where the biggest opportunity is to have those that look at your calendar and see what you really can do to reset some of those boundaries.
Yeah, yeah. it, the one thing now, I've had this conversation with several of my connections, especially recently, and some are finding that there's been a rise in toxicity within the workplaces since this whole pandemic come out, because there's pressure on everybody, right? How do you coach leaders to get beyond that, to remove that, to make it a little bit easier for their folks?
Well, the whole dynamic of being locked down and working remote really puts a pressure on leaders to do a whole lot more with communicating with their people. And I think you lose sight of how convenient it was to walk the office floor and just stop at somebody's desk and have a chat to catch up, or get a pulse or get a read on how somebody on your team is doing. And with Zoom and Teams and everything else, you don't get that same kind of connectivity. So it is incumbent on the leader to really do a lot more in digging in with that kind of communication and searching for that pulse on the team, and ferret out those pressure points and those, frankly, breaking points that people might be operating with.
Yeah, and a lot of people are reaching a lot of breaking points these days, because you're absolutely right. What tends to happen is you start earlier because you think you're going to do something with the kids later, and then you get back on and you work later. Or if you can't sleep, what do? You go work, right? And I think that pressure is just raising more and more. But how do leaders ferret that out? I mean, I get what you're saying, but how is it, how can they be a little more intuitive in understanding that this is what's going on with their team members?
Well, I have a pretty handy short list of questions that I think leaders need to periodically ask their people. And it's typically something that ought to be reserved for a one on one. It starts, and these are in no particular order, but it starts with, how are we doing as a team? Where do you think we're going as a team? Where are you going as a team member? And what can I do to help break through any hurdles or roadblocks or hindrances you've got, holding you back? And so questions like that can help people open up to the things that might be really going on in their mind, or, quote, on their desk.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's great stuff. Tell us how, let's tell everybody how we can get in touch with you, how we can find you. And aside from LinkedIn, I mean, like I said, you got to connect, you got to follow, and you got to engage with Doug. But how else, Doug, can we get a hold of you?
Yeah, my website is real simple. It's the name Doug Thorpe. That's THORPE.com. It is my homepage and also the site of my blog. I do have a podcast that I call Leadership Powered by Common Sense. There are links for the podcast there. So if you want to get a link for any of my books or programs, there's also a scheduling link there. I offer a free complimentary call just to explore if people have an issue with their small business that they'd like to talk about. I'm up and available to do that with you.
Awesome. Awesome. So again, if you're not connected to Doug, if you're not following him, if you're not engaging with him, you really need to. Just like the gold he offered here today, he offers up a lot of gold on LinkedIn, and his website is stock full of information. And I enjoy your podcast too, by the way. So that's awesome as well. Thank you for being on Coffee with Bob. I truly appreciate it.
Thanks, Bob. I appreciate you having me.
All right. You have a great day.